Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. Brian Perez is my name, and we are here on this final day of July 2024 to do a program called Pastor's Perspective, where you call in, ask your questions, and a pastor will give his perspective on what it is you're calling about, whether it's a question about the Bible or the Christian faith or some other religion, or maybe you've got an issue with a friend who has invited you to, participate in something that you're like, how do I tell this person no? Or should I tell this person no? Or, whatever the case might be. And we also welcome your question if this isn't a program just for Christians or just for religious people, or in fact, if you consider yourself a spiritual person, we would love to hear from you to find out what it is exactly that you mean by that. And the phone number to call is 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. You can also send in your questions using Facebook Messenger. Look for the Pastor's Perspective page, or by filling out the form on our flagship radio station's website, kwave.com. That gets your question to us, but we have a cutoff on that, so we won't be able to see that question if you send it in right now. But if you call in between now and 4 p.m. Pacific time, we can try to answer you here on the radio. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. And answering your questions today, we've got Dr. Bobby Conway, the apologist, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. He does not appear to be in Charlotte, North Carolina today. What's that new background there, Bobby?
Yeah, I'm at a conference that I'm doing with Frank Turk and several apologists here in Charlotte. So I'm down at a hotel and sitting in the room and then heading out to go meet with everybody right after the show.
Very cool. And here in the studio with me is Pastor Bill Welsh of Refuge Calvary Chapel in Huntington Beach, California. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm doing well. I'm surprised to be here, and we got a last minute call. And,
it was
flew down the freeway.
Yes,
I did fly too. And,
literally fly with your wings. And,
yeah. I'm glad.
You made it.
I'm glad there's less policing going on the freeways these days.
Or so it seems. It
looks like Bobby's in Europe or something. That background out the window looked like a courtyard in a French hotel or something.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm trying to figure out the lighting situation. Maybe I could, I don't know, would that be better if I'm over there?
Oh, that looks cool. Yeah.
I do like that. But we may not be able to see you. I don't know how you would look. Well, we can. Let's see. This is live radio. We're doing this all on the fly.
That's right.
Fly by the seat of your pants radio. That's what we're doing here. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. And as we await your phone calls, we will do at least some of these questions that were sent in online. Here is one from Linda in Atlanta, Georgia. And Linda writes, do you think God cares about American politics? My good friend insists that God chose Donald Trump because of the modern-day prophets that she listens to all the time. But Jesus said his kingdom is not of this world. So does God care about American politics? Bobby Conway, what say you?
I would say, well, of course he cares about politics because he cares about politicians and he cares about the decisions that they make that will influence the culture that they are leading. And so every single culture is going to have political leaders. And so he's going to care very much about that. In fact, we see in Romans 13 that there's, political leaders that, are in place, and even with military prowess during the Roman world when that was written. So, yes, he does care about politics. I think that there's a danger that we have to avoid. And the one is to realize that we do have a responsibility to follow the laws of the land, and we've been given a blessing to be able to exercise our vote. So we should vote biblically as best we know how, to vote the Christian worldview. But it's not a coercive one. We're not trying to, coerce people into our beliefs. And so we should be actively engaged, but we should never send mixed messages as activists that we believe that government's the fundamental need of the heart, but neither should we fall into passivism that just lets, people make all the decisions in the world and just kind of cast away our ability to make a difference in the political world that we live in.
Any thoughts, Bill Welsh?
Yeah, it's good to be on with you, Dr. B. Really is.
Hey, you too, buddy.
Good to see you again, brother. But the verse that came to mind for me was in Proverbs 29:2. It says, "When the righteous rule in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked man rules, the people groan." And so, like Bobby was saying, God's aware of all that's going on in politics. And there was a verse that came to me about a month ago. I'd been walking all this month with my flag in the mornings in Huntington Beach and trying to cover every main road and everything. And I got these T-shirts made that says, "Make America godly again." I had some interesting pushback from people that say, "Well, America's never been godly. How can you say again?" But anyway, God has spoken to nations. I think God has established nations. And we used to always, I remember early on in my walk with the Lord in the 70s, one of the verses that would always be brought up when speaking about politics would be that if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, I'll hear from heaven, forgive their sins, heal their land. And it was rightly brought up that was a specific, targeted promise to the people of Israel, to that land. But I ran across this one in Jeremiah chapter 18, and it says, it's God speaking through the prophet, of course, and he says, "The instant I speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom," so any nation or any kingdom, to pluck up, to pull down, and to destroy it. Here's the good part. "If that nation against whom I have spoken turns from its evil, I will relent of the disaster that I thought to bring upon it." And I think when it comes to politics, God is just as concerned about what the people of that land are involved in. As far as I know, Jesus is not running for office this year. I saw some signs around town in Huntington Beach that says Jesus 2024. And, it's a clever sign, but Jesus is not running for president. And neither primary candidate, as we're looking at him right now, or anybody that I would say, and I got to say this was back in 2016 when Trump and Hillary were running. And I found myself thinking, I don't know that I'd leave my children over the weekend at either one of their houses. But one of them is going to end up being in charge of the nation. Now, I've got a favorite in this race, of course, but God cares deeply about the people who live under the politics of any nation. And I think, as he says in Jeremiah, to any nation, if people will turn from unrighteousness, turn to righteousness, God's going to favor that land in some way. And I don't know how. And we know godly people that have lived under horrible, oppressive, murderous, governments before. But yeah, keep praying for your land and keep walking close with God. And have impact in these times, these crazy times.
Yep. Dr. Bobby Conway.
Yeah, so, one of the things that I want us to be careful of, as pastors at large that, lead churches, when I was in seminary, it was kind of like, hey, stay out of the political, arena. And, by and large, I would just say, let's vote on the issues. I wouldn't get into like parties and stuff. And I've relatively stay that way. But there is a place I think a culture can get where the church speaks up too late. And I'm thinking of Germany, for example.
Right.
Germany, the pastors, they were trying to just stay in vogue and be a part of the state. And you ended up having, you could have a cross in a church and a swastika. So Hail Hitler and Hail Jesus. And you had the state church. But then you had a group of people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Niemöller and Karl Barth. And they were, a part of the Confessor Church. And they really stood out and separated themselves. Unfortunately, a lot of blood was shed, and churches could have made a big difference if they were vocal earlier on. And so I think when we look at history, if we take Germany as an example, and I'm not saying that that's where we're going to be, but I will say the activism of the emerging generation is brutal. The cancel culture is brutal. And we have to be aware of some of the social Marxism that is being, definitely taking root in the political arena. So when you look at the left and the right, it used to be that they were closer together. And so you wouldn't, feel the temptation to get vocal. But now when you think about somebody, for example, like Kamala Harris, and this is where, maybe I get myself in trouble, but I'm willing to do so, because I'd say when you're the most liberal senator, right, and you are running on abortion, critical theory, many people don't know what that is, but it's creating the young activists in our cultures today through the education that's there. Celebratory pro-LGBT, when she's on RuPaul this past week, you probably might find yourself going as a pastor, like, well, maybe I need to start saying, is this not enough? Like, are the messages not here? And is this what we want to do? Right. And so that's not like this thing of saying that Trump's somebody that I celebrate his character. By all means, I think he sticks his foot in his mouth. I think he's impulsive. I think that there's character flaws. But if I'm thinking of a platform that's going to be better for the country versus one that could potentially destroy it in the name of the postmodern deconstruction we're seeing, I think it's really obvious. And so I almost feel like I lack integrity to beat around the bush on this one, because it's pretty glaring. And so I get concerned about that.
Yeah. And I agree with you on that. I mean, the way the political game is played in our nation, and there are some nations that have viable multi-parties all over the place. And I think Italy was one of those. I remember following one of their elections years and years ago. But it's going to come down to one of the two major parties, and it always has. For how long has it been? And so I'm with you on that, Bobby. That I look at the choices, and even though I'm not asking, President Trump or Kamala Harris to babysit my kids, I'm looking for someone who has an idea of which way to take a nation back to some kind of a common sense approach to some of the nonsense that has taken place over the last, and not just 4 years. We've watched the drift for a long, long time. We were talking about this on our live program yesterday, that on that phrase, Bobby, that I put on the T-shirt that says "Make America Godly Again," and the pushback I got on that. Well, I remember I'm 70, almost 72 years old, and I remember a time when there was censorship on radio and television, and when certain words just were not spoken. And I grew up in just outside of a small town outside of Cincinnati. And on Sundays and Wednesday evenings, the stores were shut down. And you better get your shopping done, and the other days you're going to be short, and the language and the dress and all that. We do live in a more godless time than ever when you look at the culture around us. So, don't play the emotional game when you step into the booth. I would caution people, and I might line up with a particular Christian party, and there are more than a couple of Christian parties, and I might line up with them theologically and even on their plan for the nation, but I don't want to throw away a vote for an emotional buzz for myself. It's going to come down to one of these two. Yeah. It looks like at this point. Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, with the two candidates that are on offer, what's going to happen is, if Trump wins, the left is certainly not going to be happy. And if Kamala wins, the right's not going to be happy. And that's where you wish that there was somebody that could pull our nation together better right now. Somebody that did have, good character, was, had integrity, had principles that he wanted to run on. And there used to be a time where politicians, they would pride themselves on being a family man or telling the truth. Those are virtues that we've gotten away from today. Now it's kind of like we just celebrate absolute inclusivity, not even realizing what those statements even mean, because a lot of our politicians are not thinking like ethicists, and they don't think ethically about the culture. They're thinking about winning a vote. They think economically, and we need leaders that can be raise up and be trustworthy and be amicable on both sides. I think that would be very good for our culture, but unfortunately, that's not going to be what's going to happen. So either way, I think one party is going to get the candidate that they want, while the other is going to be frustrated, and that's going to keep us in a lot more division. Right. And so I think we need to be praying about that. And I would say to those that are out there that you're Christians, but you have strong opinions about politics, I would say, biblically speaking, understand what the issues are, then what does the Bible say about those particular issues, and then which candidate is going to run on, best holding to those issues that we think about from the closest way biblically. Right. Now, that's not to say that so in other words, sometimes it's just the lesser of two evils, but you want the lesser of two evils, right? Don't go get the more of two evils. But I think a lot of Christians get real passionate because they're on social media, but they don't read their Bible, and they don't know how to give a defense. And so they're speaking about issues and on inclusivity and critical theory and all this stuff. And it's like they don't realize how absolutely antithetical their worldview is to the Bible, because they're shaped more by culture than the scripture. Yeah. And so that's where I think as pastors, I want to maybe do a series leading up to the election called The Issues We Faced, and then take a week on, abortion. What can we learn from the Bible? Take a week on sexuality, take a week on environment, and then not even mention the candidates, but just say, okay, we just went through the series. Now, this should inform you. And if you walk into a voting booth and just cast a vote for somebody that absolutely denies all these things clearly, then that's a problem of you living consistent as a Christian.
Yeah, good point. And don't forget, I want to say to everybody, don't forget those local elections and those local issues from the state down to the county and the cities. And that's the area that's a little bit more intensive on studying to prepare for that moment in the voting booth. And make sure that you know the impact of all those different measures that are going to be for you on that great, big, intimidating ballot.
Yep, for sure. Lots of other conversations we want to have in the next 45 minutes or so. 888-564-6173. That being said, I do have a question for both of you. Like Bill, you mentioned, there was a time when stores and everything were closed on Sundays and Wednesday evenings, and there might be, and this culture that we live in, it's so different than way back when. And maybe in some small towns, it's still like it was back then. I don't know. But here we have, the 24-hour convenience stores and the TV stations and the radio stations that, I remember there was a time even in my childhood where certain channels would stop broadcasting at a certain time of the night. But now it's 24/7. Everything is about 24/7. So when we say we want to go back to, make America godly again, some people might look at that and say, well, we're never going to get back to that because we've advanced, quote unquote, in our society. And that can almost be looked at as, see, you guys just want to take us back to the Stone Ages. We're not going to have cell phones anymore. Or, you guys want to take all that away from us if we go back in time. So how would you address something like that? What would you tell people? What is it that we're trying to say? We're not trying to say we want to go back to where every store is like Chick-fil-A and closed on Sundays. In one way, that'd be great, but that's probably not going to happen. Right. So what are we trying to say?
When we moved to Australia in 1991, one of the big issues that was before the people of Victoria, which is the the state that Melbourne is in, is whether or not to stop Sunday trading, which was Sunday shopping. And I thought that had long been gone. And that's when Australia was kind of defined as a pagan nation. It wasn't that they were all nasty people sacrificing babies, but on the religious numbers, there was less than 5 people that considered themselves 5%. Of the people.
Say, wow. And it was your family.
It's our family when we moved there. But less than 5% of the population considered themselves religious.
Wow.
Or God-fearing people.
But even they wanted to go back to something, or at least it was on the...
Yeah, they wanted to shut down the stores. And they would, out in WA, in West Australia, the gas stations they were on a rotation on who would stay open on the Sundays. But what I'm talking about, Ryan, with... and my desire, my prayer is a restoration to godliness. Again, it starts at the grassroots level with individuals, but the idea that are we really in a place where public school systems are continuing? They're probably scheduling right now the next drag queen show before the children in a Sunday school, in a kindergarten or first grade. And can we dial back from that? And I know that might go deeper and deeper into political issues and election issues, or voting for different measures. But I think I guess what we're praying for is revival in the church that brings a more livable culture and a safer culture for the people, safer morally and less flaunting of what I would call sinful behavior throughout Scripture.
Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, I think your question's good, Brian. I could understand people could think that for sure. Maybe just a revival coming to our land, and what the difference that could make. I think that as pastors and church leaders, we need to establish the why behind morality. Because there was a time when the culture shared kind of the ethical beliefs of the church, but they've since slid away from that. And so rest assured, even just because the culture, legalizes something doesn't mean it's moral from God's perspective. And people are feeling like, oh, well, the government's made something legal, so it's okay. But they're going to experience the consequences of those decisions. And so you think about the mental health crisis in our culture today. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a connection to that. Well, there's many connections, but one connection I think is we're abandoning morals, virtue, ethics, because those are looked at as outdated, old school. We've grown beyond those. We don't need those. Those put us in a straitjacket. So we need to establish the why behind morality to show that there's a good to being good. There's virtue in living virtuous, and it's God trying to help us to be protected. So we all need boundaries. If you throw away, freedom without boundaries leads to addiction and enslavement. And so we need a certain kind of freedom, right? And so freedom is not doing whatever we want to do. It's having the power and strength to do what we ought to do. Yeah. And so when we live that way and we understand that, when I tell the truth, when I'm faithful in my marriage, these are things that will protect my life from consequences. And so we need to invite people into the good by explaining the why and the benefits that will come in their life, because they can't assume that anymore. And we have to kind of recognize their presuppositions when we're talking, so if you take sex, for example, and go, hey, what's going to happen to you if you just cave into all of your sexual fantasies? Yeah. Well, you're going to become impulsive. You're not going to have self-control. You're going to have shame. You're going to break people's hearts. You're not going to be trustworthy. Yeah. You're going to be a slave of your own addictions and habits. You're always going to need more. It's going to get more depraved and more decadent. And so is that what you really want to do with your life? And so what ends up happening is, because our culture's bought into this, now what's happening is, let's just lose the category of marriage altogether because we can't stay faithful to each other. So now let's open it up for polyamory, and let's just have multiple love relationships. And that makes perfect sense in a culture that's fully given themselves into their hedonistic sexual desires. And so if you can say, well, how would you like to have self-control? How would you like to be trustworthy? How would you not like to be bogged down with guilt. By the way, what if we follow God's ways? Did you know there would have never been such a thing as an STD?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the reason we have this stuff is because we're getting away from His way, and He's trying to protect us. And so
those discussions
that goes a couple.
And those discussions almost become like a pre-evangelism discussion as you open up those areas where we watch culture implode around us. That's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. 888-564-6173. Wait, one more question that I must ask. Only because Linda asked it in her initial question. That was a part here that she said that her friend insists that God chose Trump because modern day prophets she listens to said that. So let's talk about these modern day prophets. Don't have to talk about Trump necessarily in this case, but what is it with these modern day prophets and the predictions and everything that they make? And, we've seen some of them that were wrong, and I didn't see them getting out there being stoned or anything. And I'm not saying they should have been. I'm just saying that what are we to make when somebody comes around and talks about prophecies and all these different things?
Or apologizing for the prophecies that didn't come about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bobby, what would you say?
I would encourage people to go and subscribe to our friend in the apologetic world, Mike Winger's YouTube channel and podcast. And Mike's doing a great job. God is using him literally to expose Benny Hinn and like bring down his ministry in a way that I think is crucial. And he just did a 2-hour response video to the guy that, had the prophecy going around and just exposed this guy. He has had so many false prophecies. And so it was interesting that he had a couple of those details about the bullet zipping past his ear, going down to his knees. But there are so many broken things about his prophecy, and he's changing the story up. And so I would say by going and listening to that 2-hour video, that would be helpful, because if somebody says 2 or 3 things that are right, but 4 or 5 things that are wrong, well, this is, the enemy can be using a person as well. And so this guy that had this video that went viral, that many people saw, I thought it was a great piece. Mike's a careful researcher, and I respect him. And so that's what I would do. I'd point people to go to that, because that, if Trump wins, he wins, but it's not going to be because this guy's video and what this guy heard.
So, okay, we've only got a few minutes left. I don't want to take a phone call right now, but Bobby, let's talk about guys like Mike Winger, who put together videos where they, quote unquote, expose these prophets, or, people like Benny Hinn and everything. And some people might say, well, isn't that the church attacking the church? Where do we draw the line on, should we expose every single thing out there that seems even a little bit off, or what would you say?
I understand, where like heresy hunters, apologists can be kind of looked at that way. But there needs to be gatekeepers for truth. Otherwise, it just gets polluted. Jesus said that you're going to have wolves among you that are going to be wearing sheep clothing. Jesus called out false teachers like the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Not only that, when you look in the scriptures, Paul specifically would call people out by name, like Demas. And so, that was very common. The Judaizers were called out in the book of Galatians. Why was Paul doing that kind of stuff? Well, it wasn't because he was trying to just, call people out for the sake of calling people out. He was a gatekeeper. He was trying to protect people from being influenced. And so can you imagine if everybody just said, you know what, we don't need to call out people and we don't need to call out false beliefs? Well, then guess what? New believers are certainly not going to recognize false beliefs when it's coming their way. And so we have to help people. And so it makes sense, in order to help people to understand what truth is, to point out where there's error. And I put myself in that category. Like, you know what, if I say something that's unbiblical or off, I'm accountable in that way. The Bible says in James 3, those of us who teach are more accountable. So I do think we have to be cautious and make sure that we protect the faith. Apologetics, you can find some form of it in every single book of the New Testament. Contending for the faith, Jude 3. I mean, you just see it everywhere. It's almost shocking to me. And the person who says that apologetics isn't important has just revealed how little evangelism he or she is doing. Because the moment you start doing some evangelism, you start getting asked questions, and this is when the apologetic task begins.
Good conversation today on the first half of Pastor's Perspective. And first half means there's a second half, and it's going to come up in just a few minutes. We are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more of your questions. Bobby Conway and Bill Welsh are here to answer them at 888-564-6173. Got a couple of lines ready to be filled, but most of them are full already. Grab one of those open lines, 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. Welcome back to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. My name is Brian Perez, and we are here till 4 p.m. Pacific time on this Wednesday, July 31st, and we would love to chat with you. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. 888-564-6173. Bobby Conway and Bill Welsh are answering your questions. Bobby is the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Pastor Bill is from Refuge Calvary Chapel in Huntington Beach, California. You hear Bill daily on the Refuge radio program, heard on many of these same stations. And Bobby, you see on YouTube. Christianity Still Makes Sense is the name of his YouTube channel and website. And his new book, Does Christianity Still Make Sense? Available on Amazon, Audible, what's the other one? Kindle, and at the Chapel Store of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Go get your copy. 888-564-6173 is our number. And let's go back to the phones. We're going to start this this segment with Nicole in Corona. What did you want to ask us, Nicole?
Hi, guys. Yes, I was just wondering, early when I tuned in, you guys were talking about the politics and what's happening and why some people don't really want to get involved in that, or very few do. And Bobby was mentioning something earlier that, he really never got really that involved with it. And then kind of look where we are now, how everything's evolved and it's so big. And I feel like so many people crave that kind of thing to know where we're at. So I guess my question is, why not address the church with things that are happening in the community locally and with politics and things like that? Why keep that quiet? Why not address all that stuff?
Are you talking about like some churches who don't talk about politics at all? What do you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I heard Bobby in the beginning say that he used to really stay away from that stuff. And I was just wondering why.
Okay, Bobby.
Why stay away from the politics, just in general, like not really discussing it at church? Because I feel like me, myself personally, I've craved to know about some of that stuff, especially local things that are happening.
Yeah, some of this was just the way that I think I was taught when I was younger. And I don't think it's accurate. I think that the way that I was taught, people meant well because what they were trying to do is make sure that we stay focused on the gospel. And so what ended up taking place, so for example, Billy Graham was very engaged in politics in his life, interacting with presidents, and he started pulling himself away from that. And I think other people started kind of like, yeah, maybe we need to be careful there. You had the moral majority with Jerry Falwell, and so people were trying to remove themselves from that in some ways. And so you started getting a little bit of kind of division on the best way to handle this. And so at one time you had people bringing in political candidates into the pulpit, and then that became problematic. And so for me, like, for example, I'm not like, some pro-Trumper, by any stretch of the means when I'm talking about what I'm saying. I'm talking about you have kind of two choices that for me personally, wouldn't be what I'd pick to unify the country. But one is going to put together a program for the country that's going to continue this deconstruction project and just lead us more towards licentiousness. This doesn't mean that the other one's going to just make everything beautiful and humming again. But I do feel like one candidate clearly would have, a program, a platform that's going to fit biblical values better. And so because of the decay of our culture and what's been happening, I feel like I've been wanting to be a little bit more vocal and a voice because I don't want to happen what took place in Germany, and that's just through being passive. Not only that, I mean, this is something that, as churches, we shouldn't be sitting around saying, go vote for this particular candidate, but we should be teaching people how to think biblically, how to vote, how to enter the voting booth, what the Bible would say about, thinking about the issues that are on the board, because that's part of discipleship. And if the church just says, you know what, we're going to just check out on this altogether, well, then what we want to give as Christians is a biblical worldview of everything, a biblical worldview of understanding entertainment, a biblical worldview of understanding politics, a biblical worldview of medicine, a biblical worldview of music. And so we can't just do a biblical worldview in the church training and then say, oh, but on politics, we're going to check out. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I thought that this was inconsistent on my behalf. And a lot of it is just, I don't like the idea of the tension it creates. But I think a lot of the tension can die down with just some good talking. Like, for example, I went out to lunch yesterday with the guy that couldn't understand why I would say that if you're looking at Trump or Kamala, Trump is clearly going to be more of a line. For him, it was unthinkable. How could you even do this? This guy, he's a convicted felon. He lacks character. Hey, I get this. But the program that Kamala is going to put in place is going to lead way more towards licentiousness than Trump. And so I said, but let's not talk about Trump or Kamala. Let's talk about your voting strategy. As a Christian, how are you thinking about voting biblically? What goes through your mind? How do you force rank the issues? Yeah. And so I just tried to shepherd him in thinking biblically about how to approach the voting booth instead of telling him who to vote for.
Yeah.
Hope that answers your question, Nicole. Thank you for calling in. Now, I want to go to Priscilla next. Now, we might have already answered Priscilla's question in just what we said right now, but go ahead, Priscilla. What did you want to know?
Well, I'm so glad this conversation came up because I struggled with this for a long time. I'm a Christian, and Trump just is, I don't understand how any Christian could vote for him. but I also am not, a Kamala fan. I think both sides are wrong. And so I know that there's pros and cons to both of them. I don't agree with, the far left or all the stuff to do with, sexism and all the abortion. I don't agree with any of that. But how is someone full of hate and who causes, division in our country and has committed so many things and continues to spew hate, how can we vote for someone like that?
Bill, what would you say?
Well, I think what Bobby has just beautifully laid out is a real answer to that question. And I think, we're not voting for a Sunday school teacher. We're not voting for, the head of the evangelism department in our churches. We're talking about voting for someone who has a vision for our country, who's a flawed man, as Bobby had said earlier. And we've all known that from long before he ran for office. And so I don't want to take a lot of time going again over this, Priscilla, but I think what Bobby said as far as comparing the two worldviews and the two views for our country, it's man, we're getting real political today, aren't we? I fear for the future of America, period, right now. But I fear for it going downhill a whole lot faster and into very dangerous territory, like Bobby was explaining, if it's under Kamala Harris. And so I'm voting for the person who has the better plan. I believe the better plan to lead us as a nation, not to babysit my kids for a weekend.
Mm-hmm. Bobby, thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm thankful that you called, and this is a question that a lot of people do wonder, and I can understand this concern. It's my concern too. I think his character, it would be a lot easier, right? Like if he wasn't so impulsive with his words, if he was a little bit more graceful, if he didn't come across so arrogant. So it's not that I'm not seeing the issues here, but it's kind of like, okay, this is the choices that we have, and I can't do anything about the choices. The choices are there, and you have the choice between A, B, and C. A, Kamala; B, Trump; C, don't vote. So you don't have to vote, but let's just say you've got two doctors and there's a child that needs surgery, and you got the choice between Dr. A, Dr. B, or you're just not going to let your voice count for which doctor works on the child needs surgery. Now, both doctors, have had some issues in the past, but one, you feel like is going to actually help save the child's life. The other might send the child to its death quicker. And so you say, I'm just not going to vote. Well, I'm not happy about either surgeon, but I'm going to vote for the surgeon that's going to help save the life of the child the best. Yeah. And so when I think of a Kamala, well, she's not thinking about saving lives. She's running on a campaign that's going to take lives. I mean, all the way up to full term, for crying out loud. I mean, aborting children, keeping borders, that have been open, and just infiltration without a process. Like, I'm all for immigration coming in here. I mean, that's wonderful, but there should be a process. We shouldn't have potential terrorists coming in without being checked. We shouldn't be, if RuPaul is celebrating you as a candidate, then we need to think about, is this candidate the person I'm going to vote for? Okay, so you've got somebody who's going to be totally celebratory of the LGBTQ agenda. You're going to have somebody that's going to be weak on, national defense. People talk about, Trump, like, you know what? There is peace through strength. People aren't going to mess with America as much when you've got a strong leader. And there's nothing wrong with strength. The problem is the arrogance that comes with it. I wish that wasn't there. So if anybody hears me saying, like, I'm all excited about Trump, no, I think it's an unfortunate situation. I think we're going to be more divided as a country the next 4 years, regardless of who wins. It's just going to be back and forth. We need somebody eventually that can unify this country, somebody that can pull us together. But these are the choices we got. And I think if I'm going to check out, well, the child's going to die. Our country is falling apart. And she is influenced by social Marxism, and we need to realize this. This is the most liberal senator in the Senate. And so for us as a Christian to just walk into a booth and cast a vote, I would turn it back and say, I don't get that. I absolutely don't get how we do that.
Yeah, and I'm not applauding Trump's personal life, obviously. I'm just endorsing his plan for America.
Mm-hmm. All right, Priscilla, thanks for calling in today on Pastor's Perspective. Gervais in Ocean Beach, what did you want to ask Bobby?
It was less of a question and more of a, I guess you'd call it an indictment. The thing about the STDs, that we wouldn't have STDs if everyone stayed in the marriage or something like that. And I'm for marriage. I'm for everything staying within the marriage to the strictest sense. But it's just not logically accurate, because it can be passed. STDs can be passed from mother to child, and it had to have originated from somewheres.
Well, isn't that what Bobby's point was? Bobby, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, that's exactly what my point is. If we would have followed God's sexual ethic from the beginning, and none of us have, myself included, I'm just saying that there wouldn't have been an STD to pass on from mother to child. Because if we would have been, if we would have recognized God's virtues in sexuality, the reason STDs came on, they're sexually transmitted diseases, and they came through multiple partners. And if we followed the way that God had, that's what I mean by that. I'm not saying that that's realistic. Unfortunately, it's not. But it's just, the point is to show how God's ways are to protect us from consequences.
Now, do you understand, Gervais, what he was trying to say?
No, that's completely incorrect. It all comes from the fall of man.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's what Bobby was saying, Gervais.
Yeah, I don't know how you're missing that.
All of man did not have anything to do with sex outside of marriage.
No, STDs did not come when the man fell. It wasn't like Adam and Eve fell, and then all of a sudden there's sexually transmitted diseases in the world. The disease came a certain way. And because you were in a fallen world, the conditions were set for STDs. But it wasn't like there was this thing called STDs in the world before there was multiple partner swapping. It's just not true.
Thank you for calling us today here on Pastor's Perspective. Now let's talk to Tara in Rancho Cucamonga, California. Tara, thanks for calling in today.
Hello, Bobby, Bill, and Brian.
Hello.
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 Thank you for taking my question.
Yeah. You want to go out and evangelize the world? Yes, please do. We need it. But what did you want to ask?
I have a question regarding, I'm actually involved in a group that I've been sober since January. No alcohol. I just believe
Wonderful.
that God's calling us back to holiness, and it's part of my witness, And there's a couple individuals that attend this group. It's through the church. It's an addictions group, and they're very charismatic. They're very sensational. They're all about feelings, very emotional, and they take up a lot of time at the group. And other people that are new believers or maybe just a little more introverted, they don't get to share. And I just don't know how to address them in a loving way. That God is a God of order. That we need to allow others to share, allow others to participate, without seeming like I'm, that I'm bringing division. I definitely don't want them to feel that, but I see a lot of error. Bobby was talking about error, in people's lives, and I know that the church that they're involved in, they believe in things that I don't believe in. I grew up in Calvary Chapel, but I just don't know how to approach them. And I really feel led to approach them because the leaders of this group, they don't see the danger. They don't see how it's scaring away all the new people. It's scaring away there's a lot of people that go to AA, and now they're going to this group, and they're hearing about Christ for the first time, and they're genuinely interested, but they can't get a word in.
Right. Now, so how do you deal with these people, Bobby? What would you say that don't seem to have godly boundaries, that don't know what it means to do things decently and in order? They just want to take up the entire conversation, not give time for anybody else. What do you suggest, Bobby?
Well, that's always a frustration for anybody in small groups. It doesn't have to be a recovery group. You just get somebody that's verbally dominant and they think that, the group exists for them to experience the therapy of just vomiting on everybody their spiritual insight. And I do think that just perhaps in the situation, you could talk about the importance of just having some, hey, let's all just take a few minutes each and share. You can, if you have to, worst comes to worst, you can say, hey, we're going to set a timer for fun just to hold us in check. You can make light of it. There's different things you can do, but that's part of whoever's leading the group, the leader needs to make sure that they manage that process, because the truth is, you can have one person that shows up and they just throw up all over the group every time, and they can kill the spirit of a group and people will stop coming. I've seen that stuff happen many times. And, my son leads the young adults group in our church, and he just came back the other night and goes, man, Dad, it just makes such a difference when, you have a group and the dynamics are good. And so the dynamics aren't good if no one talks, but the dynamics aren't good either if just one person talks. And so, I think I've been in recovery groups where you have some principles that are right at the beginning. This is what, everybody's going to, take a little bit of time. We're not here to teach, we're here to listen. You can come up with some principles. I would suggest that would protect that from happening. And I think sometimes too, people new to recovery or people new to Christianity, there can be an excitement. And sometimes the person who speaks the most needs to listen the most. And that is just one of the truths about life that's unfortunate. People often who think they know the most, know the least. The people who know the most often don't think they do. And so these are paradoxes of life. So that's what I would say.
How do you handle, Bobby, and maybe this is a good question for Dawson too, if he was there, how do you handle an emotionally draining person or day? At the end of the day, you're just like, what do you do? What's your secret, if you have one?
Yeah. Well, I've had to talk to people about being too talkative. And that's not easy. But I do think in shepherding, and I've tried to teach this to my son as he leads the group, I'll say, you're a group leader, you have a responsibility to pull away. And, basically your goal is to create a strong group that's thriving. And so being aware of how to draw out from people who are more quiet, being aware of how to dial back those who are, overly verbal, modeling that for them. And so I think sometimes, we need to teach our group leaders how to lead the groups and to be aware. So one thing I've done is I've come up with character names, like, call it like, talkative Tom, quiet, Tammy, I just come up with all these different things, interruptive, Dave, arrogant Adam, and then I'm just kind of like, how do you deal with these? And I come up with these different types of people that you'll see in a group setting, and then how to deal with it. And then you have to shepherd people through this stuff. And that's not always easy. But I think it's important, but it's tough to tell somebody because, man, I can't tell you how many times I just have people, they just talk the entire time in meetings. And they leave feeling so good, thinking that this was great, we're connecting, but they don't realize they're just draining everybody around them. And I think that we need to teach people how to ask questions. We need to show up in a group not thinking that we're the ones that are there to just rescue the group. We have things to learn from each other, and that requires both talking and listening.
Tara, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Now let's go to San Diego. Here is Israel. What did you want to know today, Israel?
Hello, Pastors and Brian. My question is it true that Jesus didn't die for everyone?
Where'd you hear this?
I heard my professor at seminary. She said that he only died for the ones who were chosen, for the ones who were predestinated.
Okay. Bobby, what say you?
So your professor's a Calvinist, and he could either be a 4-point, or a 5-point Calvinist or a hyper Calvinist. And a hyper Calvinist is somebody that doesn't even go out and do evangelism. A 5-point Calvinist is going to believe in limited atonement, and so basically the 5-point is off the acrostic tulip. The tulip acrostic was formed basically by John Calvin's teachers or people that he influenced at the Synod of Dort. So Calvin didn't talk about the tulip, but later on, his followers, they would kind of put this together, Philip Melanchthon and others, and basically limited atonement. If we're totally depraved, and we're in no condition to elect him, therefore the election's unconditional, then the atonement's limited. And so you'll see different verses where he talks about him shedding his blood for many. But I just think when you see those verses, it's not saying, because other verses say we die for the whole world. So what are we going to do? Is it going to be the many or the whole world? Well, I think when it's talking about the many are those who would end up believing, where it become effectual. But he died for the sins of the whole world. And so I was a Calvinist for most of my Christian life, a 5-point Calvinist for many of the years, then a 4-point. And I would just say that's probably worth stepping back and away from, because the reality is, if a person ought to believe, but they can't believe, then how are they morally accountable? Like, in other words, Jesus just died on the cross to save the elect. Only the elect are going to be saved. But then this means that those that weren't saved are going to go to hell for not believing in Jesus, but they could never believe in Jesus. Yeah. And so then that's like, I'm accountable for something that I couldn't do. And that doesn't seem just.
Bill?
Totally agree. Great answer.
Yeah. Israel, thank you for...
1 John 2:2 is the one that says he died not for our sins only, but also for the sins of the whole world.
Indeed.
Yeah, good verse.
Israel, thanks for calling in. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more. Orlando in Rancho Bernardo. Quick, what's your question?
Hello, pastors. Good afternoon. Just want to say thank you for blessing all of us with your wisdom. And
thank you.
My question is, I used to be a Catholic, and a close friend of mine became sick, and so they were doing this prayer for until she passed. And in the beginning, I was attending, but then I know that we're not supposed to pray to saints or the Virgin Mary, so I stopped attending, and I've been meaning to tell them the reason why I did. She passed, and they were doing this novena prayer for 9 days, and I just wanted to know, would it been okay for me to attend that? I know I don't pray to them. I only pray to God, to Jesus.
What do you say, Bill? We have about 30 seconds.
I would say you can be in a place like that, but it's pointless to pray to anyone but God. And when I pray to the Father, I'll pray to the Son, I'll pray to the Holy Spirit. I have conversations with God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But I wouldn't direct prayers to another person, even Mary. She can't answer our prayers. So direct all your prayers to God. He's listening and passionate to hear your voice, calling out to Him in prayer.
So if anything, if you get invited to an event like that, you can be sitting there silently praying just to God, not people around you might be praying to whoever, but you're just directing your prayers to
That's right, yeah.
God. All right, Orlando, thank you for calling in today on Pastor's Perspective. We have run out of time today. What a great episode. It'll be archived a little bit later on. And if you didn't get on today, call us back tomorrow. We're going to be here at the same time, 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time, and we would love to chat with you then. For Bobby Conway and Bill Welsh, I'm Brian Perez, and Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America.